Okay, Richard E. Gordon, CEO Dojo. Welcome to another edition of Solving the Puzzle, One Piece at a Time. And what I'm exploring is that one piece now is knowledge. We all know knowledge is power, but there's a lot more to it than that. So I'm super excited today to have a super great individual. He embodies this topic of knowledge. He's a student, he's a master, he's a learner, he's dedicated in life to just learning, absorbing, and teaching, which to me is the true essence of being knowledgeable when you start to teach. So without further ado, Barry Jenkins, Sr., welcome.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much first for inviting me to be on your show. I consider it a great honor to be speaking with you, and I'm just thankful to be here. And if we say some things that help somebody on their journey, then it's been time well spent. If not, I know I will enjoy myself because I enjoy just talking about some of the life lessons that I've been privileged to learn. I always tell people it's good to learn from your own mistakes, but it's better to learn from other people's mistakes. It doesn't hurt as much. But just by way of background, so people will know who I am and what I'm doing, I was the first class that came out of high school that we got drafted for Vietnam, but we didn't know if we were going to go or not. So my parents decided that they wanted to send me off to college because it was an automatic exemption. And so I graduated from high school in 1972, started college in that fall. By the time I get to, of course, we know the Vietnam War ended in 1975, so I never got over there. I was a Marine Corps PLC, but never got over to Vietnam. But I got my bachelor's degree in sociology from Old Dominion University with also a degree in law enforcement. At that time, went on to the College of William and Mary, the Marshall Witt School of Law, and 3 years later, graduated with a law degree and practiced law for a number of years. So that was kind of my academic background. Years later, I went back and got a doctorate of biblical studies from Masters International University of Divinity. I'm working on another doctorate now. I'll be finishing up this year, another doctorate in theology, which I enjoy studying. I just turned 66, so you never stop learning. You never stop evolving as a person. In fact, someone said to me, Barry, you just turned 66 this past Saturday. You can retire now, full retirement. So what does that look like for you? I said, well, my wife and I own the Better Homes and Gardens real estate franchise from Virginia Beach all the way through Williamsburg. I said, my wife and I will continue to run that. I'm the president of the International Wesleyan Holiness Association. So I do preaching, daily writings and postings. I got 2 books I'm finishing, and I'm finishing up a 3rd doctorate. And more importantly, from some of our viewers, I believe, I've been teaching martial arts. I've been in martial arts for 51 years. I started when I was 15 with Chuck Norris. I got pictures of me and Chuck Norris when I was a young man, which I hang in my dojo. And I've been teaching now for over 3 decades. And I teach Kempo. I'm an 8th degree black belt in Kempo. I am a certified full instructor in Wing Chun Kung Fu with lineage directly back to the legendary Ip Man. As you know, also, I'm a senior instructor under Paul Vunak in contemporary Jeet Kune Do. And then I did this crazy thing when I was in my mid-40s. There was this thing called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so at that time, I was a 6th degree black belt in my mid-40s, and I decided to take that black belt off, strap a white belt on, and begin the rigorous training of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It took me a while because in Jiu-Jitsu, there are some life lessons in that, like all of martial arts. You know, the one that gets the advancement is the one that just refused to quit. Yes. And I kept showing up and kept rolling and kept doing what I had to do, and ultimately got my black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so, and I'm coming up for my 2nd degree in that now in October. So, and I teach all 4 of those arts now. I teach Jiu-Jitsu, Kempo, Wing Chun, and Kempo. And so I've learned to just not give up. And that's part of it when we're talking about is knowledge enough? Well, first of all, knowledge is essential. You know, there's an old saying, we've all heard it, knowledge is power. There's a lot of truth to that. But it's not sufficient in and of itself. I'm a real big advocate of wisdom, you know, and I'll use the definition of wisdom is the application of knowledge. I liken it to a baseball game. You know, you may have the greatest knowledge of how to swing a bat, but if you don't have the timing to put it to hit to the ball, you're going to strike out. And so I believe that wisdom, that application of knowledge, which comes from experience, it comes from a lot of different things, is essential to being able to take what you know and have it bring forth results. I want my knowledge to bring forth results. And then the last thing I also talk about is tenacity, that not giving up. And if I can give you just an example of how this played out in my life and in my wife's life, I was preaching a revival outside of Texas. It was in a town called Sherman, Texas, not too far from Dallas. And it was in 2005, I believe. And my wife came with me for that revival I was preaching. And she came to me one day and she said, she had been in real estate. And she says, honey, I've been thinking about it. I've been praying about it. I just think there's something I can do with my Native American heritage. And I said, well, I have no idea. But when we get back, let me look into it. So when we got back, I began to look into it, and I saw there was a government program that was called your SBA 8A program, which was a specific program where if you were a designated certain minorities, you got a preferential treatment for certain government contracts and things such as that. And so that was knowledge. That was a knowledge of that. And we began to walk through that procedure. And because she was a card-carrying member of 2 federally recognized tribes, her great-great-great-great-grandmother had walked the Trail of Tears and survived. And so she was on the DOS roll. She was a legitimate card-carrying Native American. So we went through all of that, and we got this piece of paper from the government. It took over a year, and this paper said, you are now an officially recognized SBA 8A business. And we now knew that gave us certain abilities to earn money. And we waited by our mailbox very faithfully for the truckload of money to show up. And strangely enough, it never got delivered. And every time that we would try to get a government contract, waiving our what we would call the golden ticket, we're an 8A, we're a Native American business. They would look at us and say, but you have no past performance. The government does not give contracts to people without past performance. And then we would, with our logic, say, how do we get past performance if you won't give us an opportunity to demonstrate that we know what we're doing? And so we were in the real estate business, and this was before the crash. This is an interesting story also, is that the government originally said to us, this before the crash in 08, the government had said, we're not going to approve you as an SBA business because you're a real estate company. The government doesn't need real estate companies. So since we don't have a need of you, we're not going to approve you. And we wouldn't take no for an answer. My wife has a saying, I won't take no from someone who can't ultimately give me a yes. And so we kept pressing and pressing and pressing, would not give up, and finally got our golden ticket, but it didn't do us any good. Now, we all know what happened in 2008. The real estate market crashed, Freddie and Fannie. All of a sudden, the government now had under its control all these properties that they needed to sell. So guess what they needed? They needed real estate agents to sell them for the government. And so, but they still wouldn't give it to us because we had no past performance. So this was the beautiful thing. My wife came up with this idea. There was one real estate company that had all of the property rights in Virginia for HUD. And HUD had all these properties overwhelming them. And this real estate company was paying another local company $100 just to put that listing in the local listing service so people would know about it. And that particular real estate company was making between $7,000 and $8,000 a month just by manually putting in property addresses and basic information. So Susan and I made this trip up to this big, this office, and we said, we have a proposal for you. We will do everything that you're paying this guy $100 a property to do, that you're paying him $7,000 or $8,000 to do. We will do it for free. We won't charge you any money. And what we knew was this, that because we would take control of the listing, we would put it in for free. We got to put our signs in the front of the yards of the properties. So when buyers wanted to buy the properties, guess who they called? They called us. It took us about a year to a year and a half. Our company went from making almost no money. My wife and I sometimes wondered, we were in foreclosure at one point. We didn't have money to pay our mortgage. We did not lose the house, but we almost did. We weren't sure how we were going to actually make it month to month. And because of all this, this is where the tenacity comes in, and also the wisdom of applying. What happened is now we had all this money beginning to come in. We actually got our very first office. We were no longer working out of our home. And now, guess what we had? We had past performance. And so now that opened up this incredible window of opportunities. And Richards, I'm talking to you today, this little company that we had that started on half of a kitchen table today has 4 big offices. It went from making no money today. It's a multi-million-dollar company and growing even in the midst of the pandemic. But if we had just stopped and said, well, I've got my SBA golden ticket, I have what I have, we would still probably be sitting in that half of a kitchen table trying to figure out if we were going to make it. But we took the knowledge we had, applied with wisdom, saying, now how can I use this knowledge? And we used it by working what looked like for free. People thought we had lost our mind till the end. And then they went, you guys are crazy like foxes. And so my message is a couple-fold as I talk to different people. I'm always saying the same thing. You know, you're unique. Don't be anybody else. Everybody else is taken. You be you. And I like that because I see that on what you had, be you for you, which we say almost the exact same thing.
Yes, exactly.
You don't give up. And then there's that tenacity that just says, you know, it doesn't matter, you know, the old samurai saying about being knocked down 6, get up 7. And so there's a lot of parallels between the martial arts world and business principles. And
you covered so many great principles in that story. And that is like commendable on so many levels. It's amazing, you know, the way you navigated through. But let's try to break down a couple of little points. And I think one of the key points is that people often think knowledge, okay, you need lots of knowledge. And you see it in the martial arts, you see it in business, and you and I both coach a lot of business people. They feel they need all the answers before they get started.
No.
Exactly. So 1, do you think that's possible? And 2, of course, do you think that's something someone should do, or should they just have enough knowledge to get started and then get into the business? And I always recommend that people do an internship. You know, of course, I recommend mentors, but yeah, you're not going to know everything, you know, before you get into the business or the martial arts. A lot of people do that. I got to do everything before the martial arts. I got to be in shape. I got to learn about. So hence, do you need all the knowledge before you get started?
No, in fact, I have a saying. I always say, know what you know and know what you don't know. And what you don't know, hire someone who does know. And so what you need is that base level of knowledge. And then, you know, then we add, you know, if I was to add another label of knowledge, wisdom, tenacity, I'd also probably write vision. Also that have a plan to take and use what you know, because see, what will happen is you'll never get off square one if you're constantly just trying to learn something new. I don't know everything. I mean, I'm 66 now. I don't know everything. I try to learn something every day, but that's my desire. That's my vision for what I want my life to be, is to keep moving and not stopping.
Absolutely. And you talked about wisdom. So again, I totally agree with that. And so to explain to people, how do you go from knowledge to wisdom? And what's the difference? So again, a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people think more knowledge makes wisdom, and it doesn't always equate that way. So how do you explain it to someone so they could grasp it and make that leap?
Yeah, what I do, now again, my worldview, I tell people, you must understand, again, I've given you my credentials, but my worldview is a biblical worldview. I've been an ordained minister for several decades. I preached and teach. I pastored for over 14 years in the midst of everything else I was doing. And so I know for myself, I had one of my agents came to me maybe a month or so ago and said, Barry, you've got so much wisdom. Where did you get that from? And was there a particular book that you read that might be of some benefit to me? I said, yes, it's called Proverbs. And she looked at me and just smiled. And so, you know, Proverbs to me has a lot of very simple, small, pithy sayings. You know, when I'm grabbing wisdom, I'm looking for small, pithy sayings. You know, I want something to be quick. You know, a kind word turns away wrath. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been in negotiations with people and they will start to get emotionally upset about something. and I will say something nice to them, and it diffuses them. And that comes from the Bible, but that's also in basic business manuals. Also, you diffusing people. What's in it for, I want someone to see that when they agree with me, I want them to see the benefit of them by agreeing with me. And getting them to agree with me is to first off compliment them and direct them back to where I need them to be. The Bible, the Proverbs talks also about hard work. If you're not willing to work hard, you're not going to have any food to eat when the harvest comes in. Again, that's back to Proverbs. They were an agrarian community, so a lot of things were based upon farming. Okay, and so I'm constantly directing people back to finding that source of wisdom. And for me, that's the book of Proverbs. For other people, it might be a different source of wisdom, but the idea is to find something outside of yourself. I'm recommending people find something outside of yourself that you can read and then internalize. I want you to internalize some of the wisdom that you can read about, and then make it your own.
No, that's perfectly explained, because I look at it the same way. It's like the internal knowledge, it's the spiritual knowledge from the biblical side, or the street knowledge. Right. People get into semantics, you and I don't, because no matter how you understand it, it comes down to the same thing. And funny enough, I was talking to one of my good friends yesterday, and she said she was going to steal it. But anyway, I would always counsel one of my young martial arts instructors, and he went through all the life trials. Good kid, but he, like anyone. And so he'd always come to me for advice. And the first thing I would ask him, I said, do you want the biblical advice, or do you want the real world advice? So after being with me for many years, he said, Pastor Gordon, he said, why do you always ask me that? He said, it's the same.
I know.
So, well, people like choices.
That's right. People like choices.
People like choices.
I love it.
And so she says, I like that. I'm going to borrow that. And because truly, I agree that people try to deny it or say it doesn't have a parallel, but yeah. And the other thing about the wisdom, which I think is cool, which you mentioned, which I was just talking about again a couple of weeks ago with some friends, they say hard work. And then we've come up with this modern twist that says work hard, work smart, not hard. And so then people run in that direction who lack wisdom. So again, what they're missing is the wisdom to be able to interpret that and understand what it means. Right. So I look at it as something simple. If you had a bunch of rocks and you have a wheelbarrow, carrying them one by one is not working smart. No. If you have no wheelbarrow and you have to get it done, then you got to work hard and carry the rocks. You got to do the hard work. So I think that has a lot to do with our society as well. People have these kind of shortened versions or these snippets, and they don't have the wisdom to apply it. Because they say, oh, work smart, not hard. And so you got a lot of people say, I'm not working hard. They said work smart. No, there's an application, like you're saying, and there's a wisdom to know how to apply it. So that's what I think the beauty is. And you also talked about the tenacity. I think, again, that sometimes gets lost in people's lives. They think if they have the knowledge, if they have the path, if they have the goal, then the path is easy. Like, no, I have it all. I got the knowledge, I got the blueprint, I got a business plan. It's been approved by my uncle, my cousin likes it, my mother's in my corner, so I'm full steam ahead. So how important is tenacity with the knowledge to reach your success? And not only in the business, but you and I both, we live the life of a full life. Being financially successful is empty. Right. So how does it become full? How do you have the tenacity to live a full life?
Well, I like to equate things back to sports and martial arts sometimes. I really do.
It's real easy to do. There's always an example.
When I strap that white belt on and when you're a high-ranking martial arts, you know what I'm talking about. When you get a higher ranking black belt, then you have a certain ego that got you to that level, or you'd have quit a long time ago. And so, but I put that white belt on and I got down there with someone that had nowhere near the years of martial arts experience that I had, but he had been in jiu-jitsu. And the first time I felt the blood being choked around my neck and I had to tap out, which meant that he had won, that I had been defeated. And then for the first year or so, I felt like I was a drummer, constantly tapping, but I refused to quit. And what I was aware of was that eventually, if I stuck with it, I would tap less and I would find myself getting success because I was learning by my experiences. I was also studying, I was gaining knowledge, I was figuring out how to apply that knowledge, and then I would not put a so many people will put a self-limiting time limit upon themselves that if they don't get something by a certain time period, then they're calling it, that's the end, that they're giving up. And I so many times, and let me kind of go back, if I could, just for a minute to talk about that wisdom flows. It's a flow. It's not, I got wisdom now. No. Okay. There's part of the story that I must say that when my wife came up with this idea to go do this stuff for free to get past performance, I didn't want to do it. I said, I don't want to do that. I just think this is going to waste our time. We shouldn't do it. Now, my wife and I have a rule that if one of us feels strongly about something and the other one only moderately opposes, the one that's moderately opposing will bend their will and say, fine, you go ahead and do it. I trust you. So I said, fine, honey, let's go ahead and do it. So she did it, and that built our company up to over our first million, built over $1 million doing just the foreclosures. I came to her and said, you know, this is great. We're doing well. We can pay our bills now, but I think there's another level we can go to. And I want to get the Better Homes and Gardens real estate franchise. Well, my wife didn't want to do that. My oldest son we have 2 of our older sons are in the business. No one wanted to do it. I was the lone voice that said, I want this franchise. This will propel us to another dimension. So they, following the same rule, they said, okay, fine, we'll go ahead and do it. Well, if it hadn't been for that first $1 million, we never would have gotten the franchise, because in the real estate world, if you're not already a successful business, they won't get they won't sell you a franchise. Well, that took the business from a $1 million business now to, you know, $5, $6, $7, $8 million business a year because of the doors that opened up. So the idea was, in the beginning of this thing, my wife had the wisdom, I was opposed. But then as we evolved from that, I had the wisdom of seeing where we were going with this. I had the vision that was going to work. And again, that working together to where we find ourselves now. So if she hadn't done what she did, we'd never have gotten to the level where I was at. So wisdom's not a one and done. It is an evolving process. People can never think that they've gotten to a place where they got it. You've never got it. You're constantly getting better.
Now, perfect example. And I'm glad you clarified that, because that's a key point, and that's part of the issue. You know, what happens nowadays is, and we see it unfortunately with lots of companies, lots of very successful companies got where they are and then they stopped, and then the world passed them by. You know, they didn't keep up with technology. They didn't adapt to their customer base. They didn't continue to absorb knowledge and wisdom in the changing market. So yeah, you see that all the time. But yeah, absolutely, knowledge is changing too. You know, people don't understand that knowledge. You know, the martial arts is the perfect example. Real estate's the perfect example as well. You know, from 1 minute you're selling single dwellings, and then condos are big, and then townhouses are big. You know, because you can go to a point in time where people were like, "What's a condo? Like, what's a townhouse?" Right? You know, people are like, "Explain that to me." And you're like explaining at, you know, parties what a condo is, and like, you know, what a co-op is, and it's like, you know, certain things in the industry now are commonplace. And just same thing with Airbnb. Like, who knew what like renting your house out was? Like, but what does that mean? Like Airbnb? Like, you mean I can rent my house for a week, a weekend, a month, whatever you want. So that, again, your business alone has like so much phenomenal change. And again, as you saw, I know you started with many people that didn't change, didn't absorb new knowledge, were set in being the big guys on the block, and now they're doing something else.
Right, and I know one of the terms that we use is pivot and adjust. You have to pivot and adjust, because our market, because like, for example, COVID-19, many of our competitors have had to shut down. They've had to shut down. We're actually expanding in the midst of this thing. We've hired new managers. We're hiring new people right and left. Just because, even though, I mean, no one saw this coming. I didn't see this coming. Right. But we had, through the application of knowledge and wisdom, we had structured our business in such a way that we were able to adapt. We had to we already had the technology in place for other reasons. We went to virtual technology, virtual open houses, virtual showings. And so we were already ready for that. So when this happened, we were able to hit the ground running, because 2 years ago, we had started developing the virtual technology to be able to adapt. Now, we didn't know why we were doing it, but and getting ready for it. So I think that, this is one thing that people have got to understand in business. You never get to a place where someone's not going to try and knock you off. There was a movie years ago with Danny DeVito in it called Other People's Money.
Yeah, I remember that.
There's a line in the movie where he talks about that there was that one company making buggy whips. He said, I'm sure they made the best buggy whips in town, but it got to a place where nobody wanted buggy whips anymore, and they're out of business they go. And the same way as we're continuing to evolve in our business, we constantly don't want to be making that last buggy whip. Yeah. We've got to be adapting, and we watch companies not adapting. I mean, there was something called Blockbuster Video years ago. And you try to explain that to a 13-year-old, how you got to get there early on a Friday night to pick out the video so you can take it home and look at it. They look at you like you've lost your complete mind.
Like you're in the Stone Age.
Yeah, because they didn't adapt. So as we're developing our businesses, we must adapt to the changing circumstances, and we must be intuitive enough, which comes from the wisdom that we get from applying the knowledge, to be prepared to make the adaptation.
Again, this is everything and more that I could have thought of to chat with you. And again, like I said, I've always been impressed with you as a person, your biblical spirit, your commitment to your family. And so it didn't surprise me that you have such wisdom and so much command of knowledge. And the beauty is that I always enjoy talking to people that share it, because we all know people that don't share it, or they share it selfishly, or they're awful teachers. There's no other way around it. They're just an awful teacher. Right. So I've always admired you for continuing to fit into your schedule, which I know is very hectic on a regular level, and then you fit in all of this other stuff, which again, in your mind, you don't look at it as fitting in because that's your spirit. You do. Right. You serve your church, you serve your community. But again, from my observing you and knowing you, it's super commendable. Again, we need more people like you. And I always appreciate what you do out there in the community, in the world. And of course, all our mutual friends speak so highly of you. And again, so talking to you and really getting some insight into your knowledge is amazing. Again, because you really narrow it down to help people. You're not the teacher that complicates. You got 4 little steps. You talked about the knowledge. You talked about the application, tenacity, wisdom, and the changing. Those are keys that people could start working on tomorrow. Because I'm like you. I can give someone a whole lot of theory about martial arts and business and throw some fancy terms, and they walk away confused, and then they have no action steps. So what you mapped out is some great action steps. And like you say, people ask me, how did I prepare for COVID and business and my martial arts and my training? I'm like, we prepare for this every day of our lives. As warriors and martial artists and warriors in spirit and in God, we prepare for catastrophes, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a tornado. And what are we faced with? People are losing their jobs. That's happened. You've seen that lots in your life, especially where you live. Lots of industries have collapsed. Right. People are out of work. People are suffering. Weather conditions. So all of that is just part of our journey. And again, people like you help guide people to say, hey, there is light. There's spiritual light. There's light within you, and there's light however you seek it. So again, I thank you for your time. So any words that you want to leave us with?
Well, I mean, I just will summarize the fact of, biblically it talks about sometimes it looks real dark before the dawn. And the biggest thing I would encourage people to do is just don't give up. I know many people that are facing a lot of difficult times now. Sometimes behind the smile, there's great difficulties and pain. And I just say, don't give up. This is all part of your journey. And the only way you lose is if you quit.
Perfect words. And again, ladies and gentlemen, Barry Jenkins Sr., again, a true man of wisdom, a true man of knowledge. Again, you heard his credentials in the beginning, and he just said them because we're airing it, but he's such a humble man. I can assure you he hasn't rattled off his credentials like that in quite some time. All right. In quite some time. Yeah. So he kind of did that just to give you a feel of the point where he's coming from. But I know very well that he's not rattled them off in forever. It's kind of the martial arts where we talk, we high five, and we kind of go down our lineage, but it's not something we share with the public because we kind of live our lives. And it's the same thing with his spiritual walk. You have to walk the walk and talk the talk, and he does that. So again, I commend you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. And again, it's been a true pleasure. And again, so everybody just look on my webpage, look on Facebook, figure out how to get up with Barry Jenkins Jr. He's on the senior. He's on the East Coast. So look him up. Definitely reach out to him. And again, he would definitely help you, guide you, whatever you need in
Anything
real
I can
estate,
do.
life, anything you need. He's the guy that if he doesn't have an answer, and again, we all work from the same core. If he doesn't have an answer, he knows somebody that knows somebody.
That's right. Thank you, Richard.
Peace
Take
out. CEO Dojo, Richard E. Gordon.